Hey Jeremy, I appreciate you coming and joining us again here in this I guess we'll call them tier one talks. But today, guys, we're gonna talk about like Pandora's box topic, and it's gonna be RPE, the rate of perceived exertion. And so this is I think this is ultimately really confusing for people. Probably big picture, in my opinion, Jeremy, just because we're talking about perception and feeling, right? If you're playing a sport, let's say cricket, right? For example, or rugby, whatever it may be, is like these athletes, those athletes on the pitch or whatever it may be, they are seeking a feeling, whether they're the baller or they're the striker or the hitter. Like they when that person is hits that cricket ball perfectly, they know immediately where that ball is going, right? There's a feeling associated that momentary, like wow. And how do we get to that in sport? We got it through repetition, objective repetition, over and over and over. So we go, that ball that I just launched has a very particular feel to it, a perception. So that's why I think it's difficult. It's like, hey, we're talking about lifting weights in a tactical environment that not many people advertise their numbers. So we go, hey, what
Mm.
is the rate of perceived exertion and how do we go about it? So that's my overall sort of thoughts on RPE. It has real value, but only I think when someone really understands how to use it. And then you go, oh, it's really valuable here, maybe not so much right here. So your thoughts, Jeremy. Again, thank you for coming, joining in all the way from Australia.
Yeah,
I'd love to hear again your thoughts again on what are some of the things you hear about RPE and some of your difficult things.
yeah. Thanks, Jeff. Again, it's always good to have these discussions and provide solutions for our tactical operators out there in the field, amongst a lot of the misguided information out there. With RPE, for me, it's a mode of monitoring fatigue within. So, like you mentioned, it's subjective to the individual, but there's certain parameters around it. Because a lot of technology out there these days that's good and bad will try and influence and go away from the individual's true perception of what fatigue is. So they've got a lot of metrics, whether you're following GPSs for speeds, for meters, for intensity, heart rates that are inaccurate, different other you got linear transducers in the gym looking at bar speeds and velocity and looking at intent. But I think at certain elements we've lost the art of coming back to coaching, and then for the coach that understands, but then translating that knowledge of actually in education what RPE actually stands for.
Right.
So for me, it is a rate of perceived exertion of the one individual. Probably goes back to an experience based thing for me. So for example, we're throwing in the gym, we're looking at a we might be looking at percentage basis, but what's the RPE going to be correlated to that percentage of that lift? Now that's going to differ from my perception of it's going to differ from day to day, depending on that individual and all the other external stresses that's come into that individual that we don't know about from that day. So for them, have an understanding of technique under that bar too, and what that weight and it's how it's transformed into that lift and what output we're getting from it. So I know you and I have discussed the importance of we're really old school with note taking and compared to all the iPads and all the technology out there these days, but I'm still with my gym cards and cards with athletes I coach and myself is just writing down notes, constant notes over years and sets and reps and really get an understanding of fatigue and how that's affecting the skill base, whether it's running or lifting that is being undertaken.
Right.
So I think that's for me that the rate of perceived exertion, it's going to obviously differ from person to person, individual, but I see that the more experienced operators, the ones that have been tried and tested for a long period of time, will have a better understanding of it compared to probably the junior ones coming into the field that haven't had that really exposure to I suppose what exertion is at
Right,
some
that
point.
spectrum of experience, like people are going to still
Yeah,
draw from that. Like what, because again, it differs from person to person and where they're at in life. Or like, are they in a selection or are they in a deselection? Or are they in a training regimen where the goal isn't to create so much chronic stress that the person questions their want to be there? And so understanding the RPE for someone that is a candidate that's early on in their career, just like Jeremy's saying, may not actually have enough enough experience, enough firsthand. I'm in the moment right now. Is this dangerous? Is this a threat, or is this normal? Right. And that's what we're trying to do, is desensitize in a very healthy way. And that's what RPE is supposed to do, because the problem with RPE is the biggest problem is a lack of concrete area in which you're going, this is where I'm rooting my perception in. Right. And I think that's what, because we've got weight training, there's such a variety when it comes to weight training. Not that there's not variety in sport, but there's not that much variety in sport when you're playing a sport. Like the athletes are all about the same. And so the thing with perceived things is like a lot of people that are new to the tactical space, what they're also new to is the areas of perception in which we measure, right? Because if you're coming from sport, you're like, I'm really strong and fast, but you were being measured in a different way potentially. And so that also is like the newness to it can really, I think it can skew a person's perception a little bit, just because, to your point, they don't have the necessary experience to quantify what this new fatigue is in the tactical space. Because like it's not that we don't get tired in rugby, it's not that we don't get tired in sport, it's not that we don't get really really tired in our own volition, but when it comes through selection in the military, which is makes it truly unique, is the stressors that these athletes will take upon themselves. That alone changes the perception, because it's a different type of person. And so then what you get is you get these outliers that are really capable of putting these intense moments of training and prolong them. And so that's kind of been like, that's like the litmus. Like everyone sees it and everyone, but like, then you have these new guys that come in and go, why am I not performing at this high level? Well, because you actually, it's not that you're not there. It takes the experience of building up that experience and time to go, oh, I can push through this, or hey, this is where I can stop. And so that perception thing is, I'm going to say, what we've done is, I know there's very much math to go with RPE, and the math is you just step two to me, right? The first steps are what we do. Okay, if I need somebody to do something right, I need to create some sort of area with it they're perceiving and they can measure. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we have videos that demonstrate empirically this is what the movement should look like. So that's a piece of objective that we're going to go, okay,
yeah.
I need to create perception. I need some objective things to perceive from. So first thing that we do is, that's why we have online videos saying, hey, here's the bench press, here's the squat, here's the locking, walking lunge. Here's the parameters that I need you to start working within that are movement driven, not numerical driven. Boom, got the first thing. Let's do that. Then the next thing we do is we have our written programs. Within the written programs that complement the video, we have reps and sets and we have percentages. The reps and sets are the prescription. The percentage is the manifestation of those. Did the person, the prescribed reps and sets, did their perceived result end up being their actuation of their result? Did they move correctly? Were they able to do all the reps and sets? If they can, that's check two. Boom, boom. The next one we look at is how, here's the perception. How was their experience in those reps and sets with that percentage? So I did the movement right, but at some point my reps and sets, although they were high quality, they slowed beyond what I wanted them to be. So now there's a perception of good lift, of movement quality. I got some of my reps and sets, which are good, but I didn't get them all because my movement patterns broke down. Now I have a perception to measure from. Okay, got it. And so that's how, so we start with that with our dialogue with our athletes. We go, here's the programs, here's the videos. Listen to the videos, go into the programs. If you have questions, usually it's, hey, Jeff, I can't get your percentages. Cool, but you understand the criteria. First is move like we show you in the video. The second criteria is our reps and sets are prescribed. What we change is the percentage. And now we have some variance in that perception. And so from week to week, if they're taking notes, they're seeing, hey, am I accomplishing my reps and sets with high quality movement? It's not just, yeah, I did it. Like, and I think that that's where we're, and I know you're different too, is I'm not concerned with the number of reps. If the number of your reps were done poorly, then that's the perception. I know that poor training is going to lead to poor results. So that's my perception. And so
Mm,
That's kind of how we do it. And I know there's definitely steeper math that once you get that, you could get into. And I know that it was involved in the email. But I'd like to kind of again
mm,
go, okay, we got this new guy coming in. They and we're not, this isn't a question of their desire or will, but they're new to this. And so they don't know how to build this. And so that's what we do. We say, hey, here's the videos, here's the programs, reps and sets are prescribed, percentages can move. Now take your notes and see how you're doing. It's just like no different. I have 15 rounds with my pistol. Am I shooting and missing, or am I shooting
mm.
and hitting and reassessing? Right? It's the same thing. And so that's
Yeah.
that's how we approach RPE.
That's a good point there, Jeff. So I speak to especially the new operators that I haven't worked with before. If I'm seeing them for the first few sessions, I'll do an RPE after every set. So whether they're warm up sets, depending on what I want, what stimulus I want, but as it goes. So everyone sometimes thinks about the overall session RPE, like the end of it, the end fatigue at that end session, but it actually can be broken down into modulars and time periods right through. So for me, I always, straight in after the warm up set, what we're looking for there. Then when we're really into the meat and potatoes of the big sets, is then, okay, how's that weight on that bar perceiving, like you mentioned, the stimulus that we want, but obviously technical ability and where they're faulting. And then you can see the differences in their RPEs in their working sets based on either fatigue, like we look at, or their efficiency to move that bar correctly.
Exactly, because we have to create baseline. That's what we're trying to say. It's
Mm,
like we can't and you can't measure yourself with perception or objectivity unless you have a place to measure from, right? You have to
mm,
have a foundation. Have to be, and that's really what RP is. RP shows that we'll say that hypertrophy, like that base, that foundational building, like initial introduction to weight training. Not only are you working that tissue remolding repair, but you're also learning how to measure and perceive. And so that's why I
mm,
always say you always want to be in a state of assessment and readiness. Same with the pistol. When I have a pistol drawn or a firearm, and I know you feel the same way, I'm always in a
mm,
state of readiness when I've decided to draw that firearm. It's the same. Right before I decide to take my first rep on any set, what's
mm,
my perception? Am I in the right position and posture, or do I need a couple more breaths before I start my set or go through the door? Everything is perceived. But now we go, that doesn't help me out at all, Jeff. If you practice good breath work, good rest periods, good technique, good if you really are intent, the same way, it's like if you treat your gym time like you do range, all this objective measurement becomes very, very perceptible. And
mm,
that's where we get it. It's like, what's the most unsexy thing about our job that we're promoting? Saying, take notes, pay attention, do what you're like. It's the same thing in a tactical space when you're doing firearms demo and skydiving. Like the big part of our job was learning with the high capacity of perception that's needed in the tactical, the feel of the gun, the feel of people around you, how I'm moving. Like as soon as you make entry, you're taking a snapshot like, ooh, I've been in this type of building before. Dark, bright, flashy, a lot of noise. Like
mm,
take on that initial perception. And then from
mm,
that perception, you've made good decisions. And that's why we say, you know, weight training on a daily basis, running, rucking on trade, that is your point to practice. If you're missing the
mm,
opportunity to practice these sort of, well, Jeff, I'm not quite figuring out what, okay, well, it might just mean you just need a little bit more time practicing focus in the weight room. And that's
mm.
why that focus in the weight room will transfer in. And that's what we're just like, I got it. Like we just put two old guys telling you to have good technique. And I'm like, freak, man, like there's a good
Yeah.
reason because it works.
Oh,
So that's kind of
yeah.
how we work. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and you're right. It's just periods of experience and time, and then understanding yourself and where things are going wrong, whether it's operationally. I had a young gentleman I was working with this week with some rucking coming up to a selection, and his traps were just getting burnt out and burnt out. And then I went back through everything. It wasn't until we worked out he was too much chest breathing. So obviously too much chest breathing and lifting. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And so all these traps are just blowing out. So it wasn't until we got back and say, okay, now we need to start work on your breath work, keeping your chin down, not your head up, just different little things in his perception. And it was totally different the next 2 weeks after that with his rucking, just from a couple of different things of his own perception of
You
his
see it, right?
fatigue, but what
You're
was it causing?
you're right on. Like you get a guy like that who is intently listening and learning. and his biological function is taken over. Then you have a coach go and say, hey, see what's going on in your posture. And like, oh, it is. My posture is the direct reflex of your breath. So whatever breath you take on a good calm breath, right? Or your fight or flight, whatever it is, you're the first thing that happens metabolically when you react to a perception is we take posture. And so that's really what we're seeing is like, we know stress shows up, but can I recognize it, fall back into better posture, and then create locomotion, whether it's an exercise or it's actually tactically clearing a hall, whatever it might be. That's where this is the RPE is so valuable, guys. Like we don't want something this valuable can't be 1 + 1 is 2. Just do it. It can't be just like do 70%. As much as we'd like to rely on the math as straightforward, the math is straightforward. Physiology isn't as straightforward as 1 + 1. Okay, so I guess my thought is like, okay, this is where if someone wants the absolutes, that's what we're gonna say. We say, hey, you've got the video, this is the expectation. You have the reps and sets, that's the prescription. The percentage is more of like, hey, that's where variance comes in. But where variance does not come in is when someone is in this dialogue and we're talking RPE, we're making these shifts of effort and time. At some point, you then can get into math because then we can get into measuring bar speed with all these devices that are accurate. But if you're not measuring an accurate, I'm just going to say this. I don't want to measure somebody that like, let's say in a bench press, if they are bad technique, not because they don't care, but they haven't learned, their body's done a ton of drifting. And so it's hard to calculate math on something when the distance is constantly changing, and so is the acceleration. So once you have good technique, what we've done is we've taken a two-dimensional sort of lift, the three-dimensional bench press, we've turned it into a two-dimensional lift. Once we keep the distance the same, we know the mass isn't changing. So the only thing that's changing is what Jeremy said, the state in which the bar moves, the acceleration. So at some point as a coach, you see you're a hitting coach, you're a lifting coach, you watch someone squat, you go, that was a good. And all of a sudden you're like, you see the coach walk off and they correct them. You're like, well, I didn't see anything wrong with it. But with a really trained eye, it's not like the technique broke down. Maybe they didn't get to the right depth and they didn't hit the right speed that they've been doing set after set, and it catches our eye. That's what we're saying, guys. Like we want these objective measurements that we can actually perceive. Because if you're doing a back squat and you've been doing like a breath, brace, squat, come up, 3 breaths, and then brace again, but all of a sudden you have to take 4 breaths and 5 breaths and 6 breaths. Awesome. It means you're perceiving the need to make these changes. And that's what we're saying is like they're not absolutes in the sense of like I have my notes and every single day I can just put one more rep in. No.
Yeah.
Because the real upside of the RP is that when you're not having the best day, you can recognize it, but still go in the tactical space. I still need to perform at a very high level of skill and accuracy, even if maybe my speed isn't quite there. Like you still got to perform, guys, and RP allows us to see ultimately, am I putting in the effort that's giving me the adaptation I desire?
Yep, that's right, and that comes up to us as coaches to implement the correct again maths and meters per second or the weights, and that we determine for that individual. Now, if we've got a group of individuals in a unit we're working with at a time, you and I can tell that the smaller guys are going to be better runners than the bigger guys. So their perceived exertion straight away, especially if we're doing change of direction and turns. Yeah. We know the little guys are going to be able to get up off the ground quicker than the bigger guys, move, change direction. And the bigger guys, their perceived exertion is going to be up. So then we've got to look at what variables are making sure that we're compensating for that so everyone's on an even playing path.
Yep. Because if the role was switched, if the big guys had to carry the little guys, the big guys would be doing the perceived. But then again, but it's like that's why the tactical space is so awesome. We want big guys, little guys, small guys, fast guys, because the job is so diverse. We need those different peoples with different RPEs.
Yeah, correct. So I think it's the Borg scale, like the Borg, what everyone's sort of probably used to, the 1 to 10. Like it's it's a map there, I suppose it's a guide there, but then on the other side of that guide, you just don't look at that number and think number 10 is just balls out, you know what I mean? Balls out 10. And what does that actually 10 mean? And what does actually number one mean on that scale? Yeah,
And does a
I think because
10
everyone will just,
does a 10 for
yeah.
a ruck with someone that's really competent on the road, let's say the great
Mm,
runner, like a 10 on the road, to get to a 10 on the road would be hard for a runner. But you put
mm,
them on a load, you can get into a six and
right.
get it, you know what I'm saying? And so just keep, and that's what we're saying is like you might have an event in the morning that you're training for selections, the ruck, and that might put you at
Mm,
an RPE of 8. But then the
mm,
next in that afternoon, after a couple meals and you've done it right, you're in the weight room doing a resistance training session. You're like, man, I can't even get into that RPE of 7 because
mm,
it just goes to show maybe a body type or a history of training. But again, that's what I'm saying. At RPE, and I know Catherine said it out like before we got online. You know, he said too is like your RPE could change 4 or 5 times in an exercise in a workout. Like
mm,
you're because and also too because you're like let's say you start with leg. We're doing legs, a real hard legs day, overall legs day, and you're squatting and lunging these things like your RPE, overall RPE, because again it'll change from exercise to exercise, but your overall RPE for your first exercise compared to your last exercise, very different. Because
mm,
80% at the beginning of your exercise is different than 80% output. But here's what we're saying. It doesn't matter if that range is. Your
mm,
technique has still got to be 100%. That's the tactical world. That's what we're training to, and that's what we're banking on. Okay, we can be tired, but we still got to perform. I mean, we can say that in sport all day, but no one's dying typically after a loss in sport. So
exactly.
that's the
No.
difference. Is the perception of an extreme athlete is a very different perception of someone that's playing tennis.
Mm.
No disrespect to
I think
tennis.
no, no, but yeah, different kind of things coming back at you in the tactical sense compared to
Yep.
tennis balls.
Yep.
Um, yeah, so the other thing is too for the listeners is the thinking about that the whole stress of the day, the RPE breaking down into your skill sets of training. So not just segregating your training, your PT compared to your CQT or your tactical vehicle intercepts or your water ops, whatever you're doing. Each of that's got obviously an RPE to it as well, individually. So that's what Jeff and I are just saying. Then just start recording within all these different skill sets, the time and the RPE with it. You'll get your loads from it. You'll get your training loads, and they'll be right through that whole day.
Yeah, notes. Like the solution for all this, guys. And I know Jeremy like notes, man. Like notes. Like and it doesn't listen. If someone really does extensive notes, like myself and probably Jeremy, that may not be for you, and that's okay. But we need to have as coaches a place where you're keeping some notes that we have places that we can allow comparison. That's what we're trying to do. Notes give us an allowance of comparison, right? It shows, am I making progress? Am I at a plateau? Right? Am I regressing? Right? And if you're taking notes every single day at a point of just observation, it doesn't have to be, necessarily critiquing yourself. That's where I'm saying like there's note taking, then there's note taking with critiques. Like how am I feeling? What's my goal? Like, I mean, I'm not feeling great today, but I'm going to take notes of it. So why? When I look back the next week, go, oh, last week that's right on chest day, I didn't have a great day. So I kind of switched over to more of a skill session. So on this one, I feel good today. I want to put a little more pressure on my nervous system on this session. And that's what the notes is
Mm,
going to do for you. And when you're able to do that, you'll see that RPE is it's every rep and set. And it's just and that every rep and set is like based on what you have historically done, because now you can have all these comparisons of notes. But what will end up happening is if it's like me, my notes didn't get more and more complex over the years. My notes got more and more shorthand because of that experience and that repetitious, this is what I'm trying to feel. It's like, you have a baseball player that's hitting off a tee. They're not like struggling to figure out what the goal of hitting off a tee is, right? There's a
mm,
feeling they're trying to get to. And I think that that's the point of all this is notes show progress. They allow you to compare. And then over time, your notes become like this living RPE document that's just relative to you.
mm. Yeah, exactly. And you don't need going on a heart rate monitor and then just taking your heart rate, but you can put that into your RPE anyway from that whatever just say fatigue you've been imposed to within your session during your recovery break. So if you know you're dropping 10 beats per minute straight away, and your technique's been fine, so your RPE can level into there. Okay, I'm handling that. Now I know I'm dropping 10 beats per minute during my recovery of my squats. Technique's better. So then the next session, I'm going to look, okay, what can I do? Shit, I'm going to add some more weight to the bar and then see how I handle that stress then. So we use the same recovery time in our rest period, but all we're thinking about is, yep, how's my heart rate dropping during them reps, in between reps, and then the set, and then how's the exertion at the end of that.
Yeah, that's like that's some like super advanced stuff there, guys. Really, like, and I mean, from a perception standpoint,
Mm.
the RPE, in my opinion, is probably just as valuable, and Jeremy already said it, during your rest period. Because what is going on in between your sets is the greatest indicator of how your nervous system responds. What's going on between your sets is the greatest indicator of what your nervous system is just trying to respond to. And so that's what, when we get done with the set, we're going, oh, it was fucking tiring. Like, but how does it feel after a bicep curl as it does to a barbell back squat?
Mm.
That moment of like, whoa, okay, the system reacts. There's a reflexive nervous system to that post workload, right? We want to go into debt. The body wants to go into deficit, but we meet that stress with breath work. And so there's a
Yep.
perception, is because that perception, your RPE starts the moment you rack the weight. Because as soon as you rack it, your heart rate spikes. Because it's from your Golgi tendons historically say workload, workload, workload has been
Mm.
relieved. We need to compensate and catch up. So there's a spike in your heart rate for the next 5,
Yep.
7, 8 seconds. And then it decides, am I going to keep going or am I going to normalize? And so that is where your RPE, this is world class shit here. This is brilliant that we already said it. This is what you deal with world class athletes. Their RPE is what's in between their sets because they're trying to drive on purpose their breath in a way that drops their heart rate in a purposeful manner. And if you can
Mm.
purposely drop your heart rate, what have you done? You have purposely done less. You've told your body, burn less calories, do more work, be more efficient right fucking now. And when you do that in
Yep.
practice, your RP begins to a place where you're just communicating with your coach and you're going, thanks, coach. I've always wanted to be a world champion. You're like, bam. You're like, hey, thanks, coach. I've always wanted to be a tier one operator. High fives all around because this is where the world class workers work is RPE and rest.
Yep. And you hit a pertinent point there, Jeff, about that's linking the gym or outside the gym in conditioning or strength base straight into selection there, where there's a downtime in a serial, quicker get that heart rate back down and they're perceived from the stress that's coming on to just go bang, straight back down. Same as, yeah, we both probably educate our athletes in the gym in between each rep. Is it going to be efficient? Is it going to be poor, depending on where your breathing's at
Yeah.
and your
Yeah. We
perceived
know.
exertion? And then, yeah.
Yeah, keeping good posture will early on stress your nervous system more. You can see the response in real time HRV. If you're holding good posture, your HRV, you can see it. And then, but once your skill, once your perception of the lift or the exercise or the shooting the gun, because your skill goes up, your perception awareness improves. And when that improves, your nervous system will, you go into those flow states much, much quicker. And if you can drive into a flow state, what have you done? You've completely taken control of your perception, which is your nervous system, which is why we're talking about RPE, because we want you guys to not think it's an absolute. When you know that your RPE is a workable system with your nervous system,
Mm.
there's your world class athletes. There's your tier one operators. There's your world class surgeons. Your world class, you name it. That they're just doing the same thing. So, and I get excited about this because when I get a conversation, when I'm able to have the conversations similar to this with our athletes, I know they've got it, and I know you probably
Yeah.
feel the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. And then those that listen and want to learn and don't have a true understanding of RPE and their own awareness of their perceived exertion with certain movements and that, but once they get it, they understand it, then we start getting the proper outputs and then we can obviously increase performance at the end of the day, because that's what we're doing. We're managing fatigue, looking at fatigue and what fatigue is for that individual. And then we're saying, okay, are you able to handle it? Okay, not at the moment. We might need to manipulate what we're doing, but then once you can handle it, we're going to up it a bit.
Yeah, and it's exciting, guys, and that's we're also doing this too because we know guys get frustrated with it, but we know without a doubt that Jeremy and I are going to have a good handful or more people. They're going to come back and go, "This was the piece I was missing." And I know both of us 6 or 7 months from now are going to go, we're going to get a message or a DM or a couple of them from a couple operators ago. Hey, that thing you did with Jeff or whatever on RPE
Mm.
6 months ago, it completely, yeah. And so this is why we do it, guys. We know because Jeremy's been there. He's been there. He's lived it. He's worked it. And then he's continued to live it and work it with his life, his family. Okay. And so you have someone that's immersed in the being. Okay. And I think that's what we're trying to do, guys, is we're trying to share with you that the only difference between Jeremy and I's understanding perception is just time. And if we could just gift you this, like we don't, I'd love to be able to gift this ability to perceive someone's ability like in their 20s. And that's what we're trying to do. Because I know like our mutual friend, right,
Mm.
that came here and trained with me after he trained with
Mm.
you, he's the one of the perfect examples where you know, like, oh, like this is just going to keep transferring, keep evolving, keep moving, and like, and you know it works because those guys come back and they understand it and they use it. And the same thing, like the same person I'm talking about, is who reminds me of my buddy of mine just came out with his book, American Assassin. Very similar personality.
Yeah.
But my point is there when you start seeing people that perform at such a high level and you get to know them, you realize that they're already doing this stuff. Z was already doing a lot of this stuff because he did it through you, right? He learned. And like you see,
Mm.
they
Yeah.
take control of their training and then they teach it and they propagate it. And I think that that's the point is people do want to know this at the highest level because we hear it all the time and we see them then without us, then they out progress us because now they're seeing in real time, real world combat that I don't anymore. And Jeremy. And so we
Mm.
know that their perception is driving the future, and we're just trying to keep up with those guys.
Yeah, that's right. We're just there to educate and provide solutions now, solutions to how we can better keep them functioning for longer in the chaos that's around. So
Yep.
yeah, and once they start understanding the just a basic thing like RPE, it's so I suppose it can be poorly managed and poorly utilised. I suppose so. That's why Jeff and I are speaking about it today with this. But once people have a real grasp and have an understanding of their own exertion at certain times and how skill affects that and certain parameters, the better the outputs of your performance will be.
And I think that this will also help you guys as a coach, as athletes too, because if your coach is like,
Mm.
"Hey, we're going to follow this RPE scale," couple things, you now can then dive in a conversation with that coach, going, "Hey, let me work with you so we can get the best out of this RPE." So that's the good coach. The other coach is like, "Hey, we're going to do RPE," and you're like, "Well, I'm trying to, as an athlete, you're trying to get questions." And he's like, "No, it's just do our just." There should be a real there should be a discussion with you and your coach about how you are going to interface with RPE. It's not a blanket. So if the coach is like, "Oh, it's just blanket RPE, just follow this," that's not right. It's not okay anymore. And so just know that RPE get in dialogue with your coach, and that coach should be able to lay stuff out with you. Like I said, give you examples, physical examples to see, physical examples to measure. That will lead you into less objective things to perceive and measure, and that's where the coach athlete dialogue begins. So if you are a student and you don't want a dialogue, don't reach out to Jeremy and I. If you're a student and you
Mm.
really want to be really good at what you do and you want to dialogue and understand it, so eventually you won't need us, that's awesome too. Because then if you
Yeah,
don't need us, what ends up happening? You're probably mentoring and teaching on the inside, which is what we want anyway. So we'll
yeah,
just,
yeah.
that's my thoughts.
Yeah, 100%. So your coach, if your coaches doesn't have their own perceived RPE for that session too, what they actually want, that's the other big thing too. So just pay them off straight away. They're not obviously not invested in you properly. You know what I mean? Like, and this is where it comes down to the professionalism and the nits of it when we're dealing with coaches and just all the influencers. If they don't understand what the stress and what fatigue that session is, their own RPE, then for the athletes or their operators, then there's a disconnect straight away.
Because it's in the title, guys. The perception. Perception is an objective measurement, or I'm sorry, a subjective measurement. Excuse me.
Yep.
Now, we can get as close to objective measurement with that if we're doing certain things. We have a good program that has your best interests in mind. We have ways for you to say, this is what we expect. Here's our example. Here's a demonstration. Here's whatever it might be.
Yep.
And understand that there's a range within some of the perception. And that's what we're working. We're trying to develop basically a catalog of experiences that we can draw from and we call experience.
Yep.
Yep. So guys, here's moving forward, guys. What we like is you guys are going to drive our content, whether it's a stem from this or whatever else. Let us know, again, questions, comments, big stuff that you would like us to talk about, and throw in the comments whatever you're going to do. DM us, whatever it might be. Find me on Instagram and YouTube, whatever it might be. That's best place, or email our website, info@performancefirst.us.com. Jeremy, where's the best place they can find you again?
They can DM me on Instagram, Jeremy_MXA Performance, or my website's www.mxaperformance177.com.au.
Nice. And we'll keep putting out content, guys, but reach out to us directly, especially on the opera. Like that's what this really is for. Is like we always have basic content, but these conversations really are specifically driving towards the tier 1 guys with some of the content and dialogue that through the process of selection, deselection, and working towards those tier 1 type units, whatever they might be, there's a lot of experience. There's a lot of perception. So let us help you drive that performance to you better through understanding what your training is. So reach out to us, guys. Let us know what you want to hear. What do you like us to talk about? And we will do just that.
Yep.
Jeremy?
Thanks, Jeff.
You betcha. We'll do it again, brother. Appreciate your time. Yep. And hopefully here real soon we'll be able to actually do this in person.
Yeah, no, definitely. Once I think Alabama is going to be the goal. Right. Once you're in the facility, yeah.
We're going to make it into just a sneak preview, and we're going to move in a little bit. You know that, but we're going to get Jeremy to corral him and his family. We're going to bring him out, spend some time on the farm, shoot a bunch of content, make it a very useful journey, and then it gives us a real good excuse to get to Australia, New Zealand. See you, John Sullivan, some of the guys out there, and do a clinic out there. So anyone in Australia want to do a tactical seminar, we know some people. Let us know. Appreciate your time, Jeremy.